All right, welcome everyone. This is Backcountry Tour Mapping with ATES, and I'm so stoked to be joined today by my friend Josh Kling. Josh, how are you doing?
I'm great, Matt. Thanks for having me.
I'm so excited to talk about Silverton, to talk about ATES, and to talk about backcountry tour planning. So let's get into it. We got a lot to cover. All right, so I'm Matt Madick. I am a marketing manager on the onX Backcountry team. Here's a picture of me in Silverton from, oh man, it's a couple years ago now. Yeah, I work on the marketing team. I do a lot of things, such as like these webinars, but also like website stuff and, some ambassador stuff. So it's kind of a cool job, and it's awesome that I get to talk about skiing for a living. So pretty stoked on that. And then Josh, you want to give a little introduction to yourself?
Yeah, hey y'all. My name's Josh Kling. I'm an IFMGA licensed mountain guide and the author of the Backcountry Skiing Silverton book. For a long time, I owned a guide service out of Silverton, which is now San Juan Expeditions. I work full time as the permitting and programming coordinator for the Fort Lewis College Outdoor Program. And then moonlight with a handful of other programs that we'll talk about at the end here.
Man with many hats. Cool. So I wanted to, before we get too far into it, give a quick disclaimer. This is not an avalanche class. This is not a suitable replacement for taking one. So make sure you get your professional education, gain experience safely, and get comfortable with your gear. But, basically what we're about to run through is a pretty casual discussion using our experience in the backcountry and our experience with mapping to paint a picture on how to use onX Backcountry to plan your own tour. But formal education is really, really important. And make sure you take your classes. So what's on the docket for today? We just started going through introductions. We're going to go over a handful of new things at onX Backcountry. Then we're going to jump into our demo. We're going to plan a tour, and we're going to frame it as if Josh and I are going out on a tour tomorrow morning. So it'll be real use cases and real decisions that we would probably make if we were skiing together tomorrow. Then we're going to go over community channels for radio, and that'll tie in with our sponsor of this event, which is Rocky Talkie. We're giving away a radio at the end of this webinar, so stay tuned. And then, we're doing the giveaway and the Q&A at the end. So got a lot of good stuff to cover. Oh, went too fast. So if you have not yet purchased onX Backcountry, we got a sweet deal for you here. This is a 30% off discount to onX Backcountry if you scan this QR code. Lance will also be putting a link to this in the chat. So this is a great place if you haven't used onX Backcountry yet. There's also a 14-day free trial on this link as well. So if you are just experiencing it for the first time, it's really great. It's good to follow around with us. And I'm actually going to be sharing a handful of files during this class with you that you can really follow along and like take the tour plan we put together home with you when we're done with it. So, and then on that same landing page, we're having an awesome giveaway presented by Rocky Talkie today. So Rocky Talkies are awesome. Here's mine. Love it. Battery life is insane. The range is great. And the thing I like most about my Rocky Talkie radio is it just works. You turn it on, you get on the same channel as your friends, and you don't even need to worry about it. Like, it always seems to have a charge. It always seems to just work. So I love these. Rocky Talkie's giving away one of the mountain radios as well as the waterproof hand mics. And there's going to be a pair of those to one lucky winner. So log on to this page. It's the same page as the one I showed before. And at the way bottom, there's a form. You need to log in with your onX account. And it can be a trial, it could be a free, basic account or a premium or elite. You just need some sort of onX account to enter. Log into that form, it'll expose the form, and then you just have to enter the giveaway. And at the end of this webinar, we're going to be selecting a winner. So pretty excited to do that and spin the wheel. Cool. So what's new at onX Backcountry? We added a new feature fairly recently that I'm pretty excited about. So within all the routes in our app, you can now add what we call a ski report into the app. And I'll try to remember to show this in action. But basically what you do is if you ride a line, you can just click on it when you're done and then navigate to the ski reports tab. And then you can add a report. So you could say whether or not the skin track was blown out, whether there was rocks in it, whether you witnessed an avalanche, which you should also submit to your avalanche center if you see that. But yeah, just to give a better perspective on current conditions to your friends in the backcountry. So yeah, if you have a chance, look at a line, look at one you've done recently, and submit a ski report. And then we're also going to talk a lot about avalanche terrain exposure scale in this webinar. So I thought it would be a really good idea to turn it over to Josh to talk about ATES a little bit. So Josh, could you fill us in a little bit about the history of ATES, your experience with it through the years, and just what your thoughts in general are about it?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. So Matt detailed it pretty well here. The ATES is the Avalanche Terrain Exposure Scale, and it was originally created in Canada 20 years ago this year when a huge group from a school was caught in an avalanche with a bunch of students dying. And at that point, Parks Canada said, hey, we need to put together some sort of kind of general idea for folks on different scales of avalanche terrain and their exposure to it, so that folks who maybe aren't as dialed, or maybe they are dialed, have some sort of scale to go off of. In terms of ATES in the onX, it's one more layer and it's just 1 pixel. So you can't look at it as the whole picture. It's purely 1 pixel. But when you start adding the different pixels together, that's going to paint a picture of the terrain you're going into and the avalanche conditions that are going on. So that's kind of the general background of it. In terms of ATES in the Silverton zone where we are, those are verified on the ground by myself as the author and by some other locals, actually discussing and kind of going head to head and arguing over the different ATES scales. Other areas in onX Mac can talk to you more specifically. It might be a digital and not quite as human interactive, but for at least the Silverton zone, it's pretty accurate as far as we can tell.
Yeah, exactly. And Josh, you've been using the 8 scale when you wrote the guidebook for quite a while here. So like, it's awesome to see that process evolve from manually curating ATES maps to the technology we've developed with the auto ATES layer, which is it's a digital way for us to figure out which the classifications of ATES it is on a like automated scale. But we found that it's really, really important for us to make sure that we're having those people like Josh and like the avalanche forecasters who have been experiencing and witnessing and documenting avalanches in these areas for a really long time to have some feedback on it before we roll out into these different areas. So on this next slide, I'll show you, this is a list. If you've ever heard of us talking about ATES and you're all excited, and then you see in your app that the ATES layer is not functional there, that's the reason why is we're really focusing on trying to get that human input before we roll it out into your area, just to make sure that our model is accurate. So far, so good. It's been really well received in all the areas we've had it looked at and investigated by avalanche professionals. But the areas that we currently have it in Colorado is Crested Butte, Marble, Aspen, Berthoud Pass, Loveland Pass, Montezuma, Silverton, Mosquito Range, and East Vale Pass. In southwest Montana, we have all the Gallatin National Forest avalanche zones, the Bridgers, North Gallatins, Northern Madisons, Southern Madisons, and in Cook City. And in Utah, we have the Wasatch, so all of the Utah Avalanche Center zones for the Wasatch and the Unitas, as well as Salt Lake City, Logan, Ogden, and Provo. And we're working as quickly as we can to try to expand this more and more. We're just waiting for that human touch to do so. Yeah, and yeah, I saw a chat in here about Steamboat. I can't give you an exact date on when that will be, but hopefully as soon as we can. So yeah, I think this tool is such a game-changing opportunity, and we'll show it in practice with this Silverton guidebook and show you really like what this technology can do for you and how you can use it as an additional tool in your tool set to plan safer tours. So great. So we're talking about Silverton today. Josh, what's so great about Silverton? Why do you spend so much time in the mountains there?
Thanks for asking, Matt. Silverton's rad, joking aside. So there's a lot of great passes all over the lower 48 that we have access to. Teton Pass and Vale Pass and Washington Pass and Wolf Creek Pass. There's a lot of rad passes. The Silverton zone, and I use that as a general term for kind of everywhere from Purgatory on the south end, Purgatory Ski Resort, to kind of your Ray on the north end. We have 3 passes in that zone. So we have Coalbank Pass, just south of Silverton, north of Purgatory Resort, which is about 10,600 feet. Then north of that is Molas Pass or Molas Divide, which is 10,800 feet and change. And then north of Silverton on the way to Uray, we have Red Mountain Pass, so 11,075 feet. So not only do we have passes that tend to stay open all winter, like Washington Pass, they close down midwinter or in the winter due to snow. We have passes that for the most part, knock on wood, keep your fingers crossed, stay open. And we also have 3 of them. So in terms of skiing around Silverton, and again, there's a lot of great passes with a lot of great spots to ski. I think Silverton has the widest variety. to allow you the widest amount of options in all conditions. So if it's blinking red on the avalanche report or blinking black with the skull and crossbones and extreme, there is still plenty of super fun terrain on Silverton that exposes you to, you can never be exposed to no risk, but very, very little risk. And you're skiing super fun 800,000 foot, 15-degree POW shots or 20-degree POW shots with no overhead exposure, all the way up to as gnarly as you want to get. So I think it provides the widest variety, and that's going to promote safe decision making. So if I were to turn to Matt and I'm like, hey, Matt, you can have this moldy piece of bread or this huge piece of tres leches cake. Which option do you want? Of course, we want the tres leches cake, or at least I want the tres leches cake. And it's the same deal when you're out touring. If you put together a tour, whether it's mapped or not, and you get to the top of your run and you can either walk back down the boot track or like walk back down the skin track or ski the Narnar super fun POW shot, of course we all want to ski the super fun powder shot. However, if I go to Matt and I'm like, hey man, I've got an ice cream sundae and a tres leches cake and a brownie and like a big cupcake and, you know, all these different things, suddenly all the options look good and you're more likely to choose the safer or more risk mitigated option. And that's what you have going around Silverton and Red Mountain Pass, is instead of either, oh, are we going to ski the birthday shoots or are we going to walk back to the car? On Red Mountain Pass, you can look around, and I wrote the book and I still look around. I was there Monday and I'm like, I just want to ski all of it. Like the low angle stuff over there looks fun and the steep stuff over there looks fun. So by having all those different options, you're more likely to choose the safer option given the report. So that's kind of my spiel on Silverton and Red Mountain Pass. I don't think there's anywhere in the lower 48 that can compete with it for variety, and not the best place to talk about crowds because we're doing a webinar for a lot of people, but in terms of crowds, you know, some passes in Colorado, you have a parking attendant who's like dealing with parking at the pass because it's so crowded. With Silverton in our zone and a little bit of planning with onX, you can virtually always get to a spot where you're on your own if that's what you're shooting for. So it's rad. It's great. I love it. I've been
Yeah,
skiing.
we'll touch on parking for sure during our planning portion of this webinar, because that's always something I like to focus on. It's just making sure you're parking appropriately too.
Yeah, my first involvement teaching an Avi course here was in Silverton in 2003. So I'm on 20 years of working in the area, and I've been skiing in the area for 21 years, for a couple years more.
He's a local legend for sure. My Silverton story, I had my first experience in Silverton going to Silverton Mountain, the lift access one, and just we got like 40 inches of snow that weekend. It was just like the roads were snowed in. We couldn't get out for several days after. And after that, I was just like, man, I want to spend as much time as I possibly can in Silverton and exploring here and riding just some of the craziest stuff I've ever seen. And then the next year, I finally got into split boarding. This was like 2016. And I showed up to the Silverton Split Fest, which if you're a split boarder, put that one on your list. It's a really, really great time. But I showed up and I'm just like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what I'm doing out here. So I very quickly bought Josh's guidebook right here and have been kind of making it my mission the last couple of years to just like go through and check off as many of these lines as I can. This is basically my 50 classic ski descents of North America. So thank you, Josh, for putting this together and giving me a Bible to follow. And now it's awesome. It's come full circle because this guidebook is integrated into the onX Backcountry app from the information that Josh has provided in that guidebook. So you're really getting like the best beta you can from the guy who knows the area the best and has a lot of great insight onto how to ski things no matter what the conditions are, and also what to look out for in these different lines in terms of hazards. So that being said, we're going into the app. So to start off, I wanted to just give a little bit of level setting just with like the onX Backcountry app and kind of really start at a high level here. So I wanted to orient you with just like what this is and how to use it. So what we're looking at right now is the web map version. I always feel like this is where I like to plan and to, you know, explore the maps and everything like that. So I like doing a lot of my planning on desktop, and then I'll show you how to bring all of that stuff onto your mobile device and to share it with your friends when we're done. But I'll just go around the horn here. This is our search tool. You can search for trailheads, mountains, peaks. You can put GPS coordinates into here and it'll show you exactly like, whatever you're looking for. It's a really great place to start if you know the area. So I'll just like go to Silverton, Silverton, Colorado. There's the great town. So this is always a great place to navigate around and to search for points of interest. And then this is your activity selector right here. So onX Backcountry is a GPS mapping app for hiking, for mountain biking, for ski touring, and for rock climbing. So there's kind of an activity for everyone here, and it's important to make sure that you're in the right mode because that'll affect like what you actually see on the maps. So like if you switch between hiking and mountain biking, you can see that the actual trail data is changing in conjunction with that. Over here, you have your tools. We're going to show these pretty in depth during the webinar when we make our route and we mark everything up, but this is the route builder. This is your line tool. We have an area shape tool as well, waypoints, and then photo waypoints. Cool. When you go down here, this is your compass. And if you hit option, if you're or control, when you're on a PC or a Mac, you can start tilting and panning your map around. And then I always like with this compass too, you can always see which direction is facing north. If you ever want to reorient yourself with the north facing map, you just click this and it'll bring you right back to being north oriented. The next section down here is your map layers. So we've been really hard at work building a ton of different map layers, many of which we're going to show you during the webinar. So, we have some, these are all of our winter ones. So like slope angle, slope aspect, avalanche terrain exposure scale, avalanche forecast, avalanche run out. So I'm actually going to turn on the avalanche forecast, slope angle, and I think that's all I want to turn on for now. But also, like, if you're not sure what these layers do or how to use them, this layer details button right here is a really great place to learn. So we talked a little about ATES a minute ago. I know we didn't go into the full classifications of like what each of these mean. So, this is a really good place to kind of do that research and to figure out what these different classifications mean. And we'll try to touch a little bit more on what those different colors mean in a little bit. But yeah, it's an awesome place to educate yourself on what these layers can do for you. And then I think other than that, we can just show things contextually. So awesome, Josh. Now that we're here and we want to go skiing, the first step is to always look at the avalanche report. So to see the avalanche reports, you want to zoom out a little bit. You can see this is the whole state of Colorado. So this is where we want to ski down here in Silverton. But you can see the avalanche danger is different across the state depending on where you are. So it's always important to look for this particular zone you're in. And if you click these two, you can see the different avalanche zones and then even open up your local avalanche centers and where to find the different information. So I've actually opened this up for us. And then Josh, do you want to help me break down the avalanche report? What's going on in the San Juans?
Yeah, totally. So if you only read the avalanche report once in a while, it's like picking up a novel and flipping to chapter 7 and then trying to figure out who the characters are in the middle of chapter 7, in the middle of page, whatever, in the middle of the paragraph. That's really hard to do. Your best bet for following along with the characters of the novel, in our case, our novel's a snowpack, is by reading the avalanche report every day. So they publish it in the afternoon in Colorado, different in different spots, but they publish it in the afternoon in Colorado, and I'd hop on either that evening or in the morning and just give a quick read. The first tab we're out in here is the avalanche forecast, which is going to give us our likelihood and where we could trigger avalanches and what the avalanche problem is. And that's probably the biggest one for us, for me as a backcountry traveler. If you go on to Red Mountain Pass and you say, yeah, avalanches are the problem, well, there's all sorts of different types of avalanches out there. No different than if you go camping and you have a rattlesnake in your tent, that's a big issue. If you have a grizzly bear in your tent, that's also a really big issue, but you're going to deal with those two problems differently. Same thing with avalanches. So when you hop on the report and you start reading it and it tells you different types of avalanche problems, we're going to deal with those problems differently. So I start with this, reading the text right there. So you could trigger a large and dangerous avalanche in steep connected terrain. And I read through that, looking for words that pop out. And reading this one tonight, it talks about most of the recent human-triggered avalanche activity has been near tree line on slopes around 40 degrees. And for me as a backcountry traveler, that's the biggest concern, right? I care when Helitrax is dropping bombs or CDOT's blowing stuff up with huge charges. But what I really care about is what's going on with other human human beings in the backcountry, human triggered avalanches. So what we can do here is if we go to the Avalanche Explorer page, click that, would you?
Yeah, I just did. Yeah, so CIC is awesome with this Avalanche Explorer page. It's a really good way to just look at a whole picture, either of the state or of a whole zone, and just kind of get like really broad data sets combined, as well as like looking at individual incidents. So yeah, go ahead, Josh.
No, you're killing it. So I jump on the Avalanche Explorer page, and then if you have too much data, I get overwhelmed. My wife is definitely not watching. When she's like, hey, what 42 different shades of tile do you want in your kitchen? I get really overwhelmed. If she's like one or two, I can deal with that. So same thing here. I don't look at all the avalanches across the entire state. I'm going to click on my zone. So I'll go over to the right and click on Northern San Juans is where we're going to be skiing today. And that's going to give me info about what's going on in the Northern San Juans. All those dots on the map are right in the Red Mountain Pass zone, except for that random outlier, which was on an ice climb over by Lake City. And I zoom in and then I look at the different dates and I look at the info. So there's three things I'm looking at with recent avalanches. The first thing I'm going to look at is when. And I'm thinking, is it current, recent, or past? Current being like now. Maybe we left the car in the morning and there was no avalanche and I come back in an avalanche. You're like, that was now, or that happened really, really recently. So the first one would be now, current. The second one would be recent. And that's you're looking like 24 to 48 hours ago. And then over that is past. So I'm really looking at current and recent avalanches on the report. And there's a whole bunch if we scroll down there from the 20th, from the 19th, from the 18th. So I'm looking at current, recent, or past. And I'm most concerned about the current and recent. The second thing I'm looking at, is it terrain or location specific? So location specific, there was an avalanche up in the Vale area where a snowmobiler rode his due off a huge cornice and then sat there and was like, trying to make it avalanche. And it eventually ripped. That's not the exact story, but more or less. So it wasn't specific to that type of terrain. It was specific to that location where the snowmobiler launched. So I'm thinking, is it terrain or location specific? I'm going to go through these 13 avalanches and I'm going to look at what aspect were most of them, what elevation were most of them. It's a way big difference if it's a snowmobiler launching their due versus, oh, wow, everything's getting triggered on near tree line, north aspects, above whatever elevation. So I scroll through there. First thing I'm looking for is current, recent, or past. Second thing, I'm going to start clicking on the reports and I'm looking, is it terrain or location specific? Again, location specific would be like the snowmobiler. Terrain specific would be like all north aspects near and above tree line. And then the third thing I'm going to look at is the general character of the avalanche. And to do that, I just start clicking through the reports. Some are going to be really detailed and some probably aren't. You got to take them with a grain of salt. Remember, just like the 8 scale, each one of these is just a pixel trying to paint that picture. So I start clicking on these and seeing what's going on. So this is an avalanche. Today is the 21st. So from 3 days ago, Commodore Basin, a really popular zone in the Red Mountain Pass area that's in onX. And it gives some detail, the kind of dork information running across the screen right there. So elevation is tree line, aspect is east, hard slab, artificial ski or unintentional. And then for the folks in the avalanche courses, R2 being correct, 20 to 40% of the avalanche path, and D2 being able to injure, bury, or kill a person. So those are what concern me the most, right? Is avalanches that could injure, bury, or kill a person. And I click on them and I see what info I can get. This one doesn't have a ton of info. 2 people, it looks like, were buried or partially buried, no injuries, self-evac. Kind of thread the needle on that one. But I click through them and I see, again, current, recent, or past. I see terrain or location, and I see general character. And that's going to paint a bunch of pictures for me, or a bunch of pixels to paint my picture. And that's where I start every day. Even if I'm not going out, I was out on Monday, so 2 days ago. I'm not going to get out again till this Sunday in a work capacity, but I'm reading it every morning, trying to keep up with it. So after I go through the report here, can you go back to the our main avalanche forecast, Matt?
Yeah, give me one sec. I actually want to show something I like to do as well. Is like,
oh yeah,
when these observations come in, or these incident reports, they often are tagged with latitude and longitude, and we can actually go there with the onX Backcountry, and for me, this is like is the concept of demystifying avalanches. So you just can plop it in here. I think I need to remove these letters. Let's see if it works. Please. There we
Yeah,
go.
yep, totally.
So you click that, and then it shows you exactly where this avalanche occurred. I'm going to actually drop this into satellite view. I'll turn off the slope angle just so we can look at the lay of the land. So yeah, the report says it was here, and voila. That looks like just like what we were seeing in the pictures, right? They came down this chute, and then they were in this gully, and that's where the avalanche release was along this way. So this is a really good exercise too, is looking at these avalanche reports, reading them, and learning what you can, and learning from the decisions that were made by using these maps, turning on slope angle, slope aspect, reading the report, and just kind of like painting that picture for yourself. So sweet. Yeah, so let's go back into the main report.
So I start with the top section there. We're going to click back. I figure out the buzzword. So for this one, recent human triggered avalanches, that's a big deal. So I bump over to the Avalanche Explorer, get some info there, takes a few minutes, pour your favorite beverage. Then I'll scroll down. And
On this page or to Avalanche Explorer?
No, right here.
Okay.
Then I'm going to scroll down and I'm going to look at my avalanche problems. And again, a rattlesnake in your camp and a grizzly bear in your camp are both really big problems, or shark in your camp, depending where you're camping, I suppose. But you're going to deal with all those problems differently. So I want to know not just that there is avalanche problems, but what the avalanche problems are. And these two problems that we have going right now, persistent slab and wind slab, are very, very common in the San Juans. Why do I care about them? Well, persistent slab avalanches tend to be more contained by terrain features. So that cool picture behind Matt's head of the different chutes in there, or the picture behind me with all the different chutes in there, a persistent slab problem is more likely to zipper the bowl per se and go from feature to feature to feature to feature. They're harder to trigger, or sorry, not harder to trigger, harder to predict, and they can be very destructive. Wind slab problems, scrolling down, tend to be easier to find. If you're on terrain where there's no snow on one side of the ridge, or 20 centimeters of snow on one side of the ridge, and on the other side there's 300 centimeters of snow, it didn't only snow 9 feet on that leeward side of the ridge. That's all wind loading. So wind slabs are much easier to track than persistent slabs. And we're going to deal with each of those differently. So first step, I open up the report and I read the top. I get the avalanche danger and find the buzzwords. Second thing is I go to the Avalanche Explorer, click on the San Juans, and I try to bebop through specifically the avalanches that were at least D2, big enough to bury, injure, or kill a person. And then the third thing, I'll come back, I'll go through the different problems. And then once I've had the report for the day and the problems, can you scroll back up, Matt?
Yeah.
Maybe. Yeah, there we go. So I go from the avalanche forecast to the forecast discussion. And the forecast discussion is just a little more detailed, a little more dorked out weather discussion and avalanche discussion. But again, if you only read it once every 6 weeks, it's really hard to follow those characters. If you read it daily, make it part of your morning or evening reading, it's way easier to track those layers and track those characters. So when you do go out touring, you're not getting surprised. You kind of have an idea of what's going on.
And I love the flavor that the local avalanche forecasters add to the section. Like, they definitely try to make them interesting and exciting, such as referencing AC/DC in the late 80s. So it's always awesome to read these. And again, Josh, you're in the San Juans. Me, I come there hopefully once or twice a year. So a lot of what I'm doing is just trying to get up to speed with what's going on in these areas. If I'm trying to say hey, I'm going this weekend, what's been going on. So usually part of that process involves me a week before just starting to read these every day and just starting to dive a little bit more into the state of the state and using onX and the avalanche instance to just demystify avalanches and the observations and really paint a picture in my own mind of what's going on in this area. So anything else to add, Josh?
No, you just got to kind of follow along. So I'm going to the Mount Baker zone for a week and a half in March. And I've been following along with their general weather and snow and what's happening all winter, trying to keep up with it. Maybe I'm not reading it daily at this point, but trying to keep up with it so you have an idea of where you're going. If you're planning that hut trip to whatever the hut is, start reading that avalanche report, several weeks before you end up going there.
Yeah, great advice. Cool. So I think we've got a better understanding of what the snow is doing. We've looked at some recent observations and incidents, and we know what the problems are. So now I think it's a good time for us to start looking at possible options in the onX Backcountry app and just start to figure out like, all right, Josh, I'm in for the weekend. What are we doing? So my favorite place to start with this is the guidebooks. So this one in particular that we're going to talk about is written by our friend Josh here. So I'll show you this digital experience of this written guidebook and how you can just start evaluating what zones you think are appropriate from the get-go. So when you're in here, this discover button is where you're going to want to look for the guidebooks when you're in ski tour mode. So once you hit discover, it's going to pop up all of the different regions that we have in the onX Backcountry app. So you can see there's places like Shark Park, that's kind of by me, Silverton, Williams Peak. This is my favorite place to go. Low angle love story. Marble, Crested Butte. We have a ton of different areas that are captured here with more and more guidebook authors being onboarded as fast as we can work out deals with them. So we're looking at the Silverton one. So if you click into Silverton, it'll magically move your map to the whole zone. And we start getting a little bit of context, right? Like here's a general description of Silverton and the areas and some of the things to look out for. And then you also get a handful of like dynamic information put in front of you. So here's the avalanche report that we just looked at. And there's actually 2 zones that are encompassed in this guidebook, like it covers the zone. There's the north and the south San Juans generally. So both of the forecasts that are listed there. And then one other awesome thing we have that pulls these in is like the closest snowtail station in these zones. So you can actually get a better read of like, what was the 24-hour accumulation? What's the current snow depth at these areas and what the temperature is. And as you can actually see these on the map. They're the little snowflake icons. So you can see like in different places, like Red Mountain Pass, which is right up here. Like that's what the current state is. Like the high and the low is an extremely important tool that I use in the spring, especially when I'm backcountry skiing in Silverton and saying like, did we actually get a refreeze last night? Like this will actually tell you that. So I love using that. And this is kind of like the difference between the printed and the printed and the digital guidebooks. Is just the dynamic information that could be imported. But it's always awesome to have the guidebook as a backup in your pocket too. And one of the ski atlases. So now that we've decided we're going to be in Silverton, we need to start looking at different zones. So I just clicked over here and that'll show you just all of the zones that are in this area. And it can be daunting. Like, as Josh just said, how many 3 mountain passes? Tons of different areas to look at here. So if you start like scrolling through these and hovering over them, you can see on the map that they're highlighting in green, like where these zones actually are. It's a little hard to see with the avalanche report turned on, but that's okay. So one of the things too that I like to do is always plan, like when I go to the San Juans, I'm usually trying to ride for a couple days. So I always start with just like looking like what is the low angle, like if it just starts dumping and, is going to be extremely difficult for us to ski the steep, dreamy lines that we're always thinking about. What are our options there? So we'll go over that quickly. The number one thing I like to look for just at a glance getting into this is the ATES rating. So the ATES ratings that are in our guidebooks are not pulled from our auto ATES layer. They're actually from the guidebook authors like Josh. So when they're building these guidebooks for the printed versions and for our digital versions, they're manually inputting these ATES using the traditional methods. So what I'm looking for right now for a safer tour is there's ATES level 3, that's complex. ATES level 2 is challenging. I don't think there's any extreme in the guidebook in this zone, but these simple ones are the ones I'm looking for. So I'll open this up. And then I actually want to read just like the description, since we didn't go there with like earlier, is back in this classification scale. So simple terrain is defined as exposure to low angle or primarily forested terrain. Some forest openings may involve the runout zones of infrequent avalanches and terrain traps may exist. Many options to reduce or eliminate exposure. So that's what we're looking for. It's always awesome to have a tour like this in your back pocket. And the guidebooks make it really easy to find what we call like light tours, or ones that you can kind of do without putting yourself at great risk. So, Josh, I've only been in Coal Creek about once. I think it was just complete whiteout day, and we were like, we need somewhere to ride, and we ended up riding here. Um, why do you love this zone, and why do you think it's a great stopping point along the highway?
Yeah, totally. So there's two runs there. There's Deer Creek and Coal Creek, and they both utilize pass elevation. So for Coal Creek, which is the one at the top of the pass, you begin at the top of Coal Bank. You end up going uphill about 400 feet, and then you ski down 600 feet because you're utilizing that pass elevation loss. And then for Deer Creek, which is one drainage over, you're going up about 600 feet to 800 feet and getting anywhere from 800 to 1,000 down, depending on how you run the ridge. So you get a big bonus because of the pass. While there is avalanche terrain, it definitely falls into that simple category where it's easy to mitigate it. You can't control the snowpack, you can only control terrain, and a lot of options for doing so. So they're really good kind of entry level tours, especially that Coal Creek one. Careful, Coal Creek is a little benchy if you're a snowboarder, and the Deer Creek one. And the cheat on Deer Creek, the approach is right under the cursor right now, and you're going to go up to the top of the ridge. And what a lot of folks do is they try to ski. Can you put the cursor like right at the top of the you can't see mine at the top of the Deer Creek? Nope, other one. Go south or go north. North.
Oh, this one?
Yeah, Deer Creek. Totally.
Yeah.
So people don't want to have to hike out. So they hike up the Deer Creek approach, and then they try to ski this like angle off to the side on this horrible traverse. And that angle is not only not fall line skiing, it's way more easterly facing and often way crustier. The way Deer Creek is, I don't want to say designed to be skied, but if you want the maximum bang, is you're going to go up to the top and then follow the track. Yep, keep going up that, down the ridge or up the ridge until you're way in there. And you'll find a bunch of alleys in the trees. And you're going to lap those alleys up and down. It's absolutely mitigatable terrain, absolutely terrain you can skin up. It is not overly steep for the whole part if you're good with your route finding. And you just go up and down there as much as you want. That's where the good snow is going to be. It is well shaded, treed, north facing terrain. And then when you're ready to come out, you just tour back up and then ski back down to the car. Again, the mistake most people make is they try to like force it in one run, and then they get stuck or they end up skiing crummy snow because they're skiing south facing or east facing. Just lap the up and down on that ridge. And then when you're done, just say, hey, we've had 9 good runs. We're going to ski the garbage run out to the car now.
Yeah,
Those
that's
are great
awesome.
entry level highway side attractions. If you link Coal Creek and Deer Creek, so start at the top of Coal Bank Pass and then either park a shuttle or hitch all the way back up, you get a bunch of extra bang for your buck.
Yeah, so you're saying you could come up here, drop Coal Creek, traverse over here, and go up this way, or would you kind of cut
Yes, the
over
so
this way?
the drop on Coal Creek right there, kind of by
Uh-huh.
your cursor. So you ski that down, you're going to come out right at that curve, and directly across that curve, a couple hundred yards down the road is the start to Deer Creek. So you
Nice.
go
Yeah.
up Coal Creek, down Coal Creek, then you go up Deer Creek, then down Deer Creek, and then all the way back.
Yeah. All the way back to the road.
All the way back
Yeah.
to your car at the top of the pass. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Sweet. Yeah, I want to show one other thing too is like, we've started identifying a handful of these routes, and I often find too, you pick all these out and you're like, oh, great. And then when you get to the trailhead, you kind of forget which ones you've been looking at. You can actually select all these trails as well. And if you are like, this is the approach, like we want to like focus on this one, this little tab up here will actually save it to your content. So this is our way of like favoriting trails, basically. So I'm going to do this one. I'll do Coal Creek. I'll do Deer Creek. And I'll just do, just say Upper Deer Creek. Yeah, perfect. So I like all these ones. And the way to reference these in the future when you're like, man, what were we talking about last night? You go into my content and then you hit, there's created and then saved. And this will be a registry of, you can do hiking trails in the summer. You can do snowtail stations like we were looking at earlier, or backcountry ski lines. So there they all are. It's a folder of all the lines that you said I want to ski. So that's a great place to just start building that database based on these guidebook routes. So I think looking at the avalanche forecast, it's awesome we have like a low angle zone that we've identified, but I'm hoping, and I have a dream, to ride a classic San Juan adventure. So I think that's the next part. Is we'll talk a little bit about a Josh Kling special. Josh and I actually got out and rode this line together last winter. So we're going to kind of walk through that route and just show you how to plan a more complicated tour, utilizing like the ATES layer, the run out layers, and multiple boosts. So we're going to scoot over to the top of Red Mountain Pass. Actually, I'm going to do it in the guidebook way. Let's do it this way and see if it'll work. Nice. Red Mountain Pass. Bingo. So I'm going to turn off this one because it can cause things to be blurry. And this one.
Can I just talk about the report while you're bringing it up, Matt?
Please do. Yeah.
So totally. Right now on the report for tomorrow, we have moderate danger level. So moderate being natural avalanches are unlikely. Human triggered avalanches are possible in specific terrain features. So I'm like, okay, specific terrain features. What is that? Well, I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's terrain with big convexities or sparsely treed. So they're more like trigger points, or a big terrain trap at the bottom, like a creek or a gulch. I'm thinking like something very specific, or like a couloir where the top is very wind loaded in terms of moderate. So I might be able to push it a little bit, but it's definitely not low. So I want my tour to be that tour with the Tres Leches cake and the ice cream sundae and the brownie and the chocolate cake that has a bunch of options, because it's always easier to dial back when we're in the field. I don't want to be making more aggressive options. If me and Matt get together at the Coffee Bear in the morning, quick plug, Holly, and we're like, hey, we're going to close the Narnar shoots and the Sicky Sick trees. Those are just too aggressive for today. We don't want to get more aggressive on that when we're in the field. We only want to tone it back. So I want to pick a tour that has a lot of options. And an option isn't A, we start up on Red Mountain Pass, or B, we get a couple hundred yards up and then we don't like it and we turn around and go to Coalbank Pass 12 miles away. The options have to exist throughout the tour. So I'm trying to put together a tour with all those options in it. And the tour that Matt's about to show you definitely does that.
Yeah. And I think, like, as you can see, there's a whole spider web of different trails and different ways to link them together. So yeah, like Josh, like when we planned this tour last year, it's an interesting thing just looking at traversing through a handful of aspects with looking at different avalanche reports, and then also like maximizing vert. Like that's the beauty of Red Mountain Pass, is that you can use your car to get pretty high up and then take it down to either further parts of the road and have a shuttle car, link up different traverses and stuff like that. So yeah. So how do we start this? Yeah, so I think some of the areas that Josh and I had looked at before this call that we thought were great places to start was Cemetery, as well as Chattanooga and like the Sam's Glades area, because they match a lot of like what we're looking for in terms of like wanting to ride, as well as like what we think could be suitable terrain based on the avalanche problems of the day. So yeah, anything to add, Josh?
No, when I'm putting together my tour, I want those options. And then I want to do a reach for the moon or a shoot for the moon option is my A. If everything's going right, we're feeling good, the snow's feeling good, that's our first option. And then an option B should be something along the way. And the option C is like my tuck tail, and maybe we're ducking out of here. But they should all be right along the tour. It can't be options where like we park at this zone if it's going good, and if we get up and don't like it, we're going to park at the new zone. They all have to exist on the same tour. And this one does that.
Awesome. So the main parking area for the top of Red Mountain Pass is right here. We actually have it marked with parking icon, but this is actually I'm going to turn on. I have a little cheater that I'm going to do just to make sure we hit some of these touching points. There we go. Cool. So this is just for me to kind of have some things we meant to talk about in the webinar. But yeah, I always say that every adventure starts at the car. So parking is always an important thing to consider, whether you're in a crowded trailhead or a less crowded trailhead, and just making sure you're parking in the right place. That you allow CDOT or your local snowplow world to move the snow that they need to move. So Red Mountain Pass, Josh, you got any tips for parking or any cardinal sins of parking, I should say?
Yeah, so they redid the parking on Red Mountain Pass this year, and they flopped or swapped the plow turnaround in the parking. So it's all very well signed, but just make sure if you haven't been there this year that you're checking out the correct signage. The parking is now on the north side of the pass, the Uray side, on the west side of the road. That used to be the plow turnaround, and now the plow turnaround is on the east side of the road on the north side of the pass. And then the rest of the pass, right now where it's zoomed in, where that trailhead is, that's kind of like the parking to get into St. Paul's Lodge. They're asking people to pull straight in and out as opposed to drawing it out parallel parking. And that's all detailed on the CDOT website. Just make sure you're paying attention to the signage. Make sure you're 3 feet off the white. If you need to dig out a spot, pull out your shovels and dig it out a little bit. Yeah, they're also become more particular the past few years about parking in avalanche zones during an avalanche warning or avalanche watch. So just make sure you're checking the regulations for what's going on that day.
Yeah, and this is one of the most intense roads for CDOT to keep open in the entire state. There's Josh, you know the number of avalanche paths across it? It's like hundreds, right?
Yeah, there's over 110 named avalanche paths. It's the most avalanche prone section of highway in the US, more than Wolf Creek or Teton or Vale or Hatcher. There's more named avalanche paths that hit this highway than anywhere else in the US.
Yeah. So that shows just it's really important not only to be courteous to your fellow backcountry travelers, but like to the people that are keeping this road that gives you insane access to these high alpine areas, giving them a little space to do what they need to do to keep these roads safe and open. So with the changes, is this still the parking lot, right? For where we want to park, do you think?
Yeah, correct. So that's the
Okay.
main parking lot on the San Juan County or Silverton side, and you can
Yep.
absolutely still park there. You just got to pull it in tight, make sure you're 3 feet off the white. A lot of
Cool.
times there's a porta-john right there, and then insider trading, if you go to the porta-john or pretty much where that blue dot is on the screen, and you have Verizon, you should get cell service right there because you have a good view down the valley.
That's a pro tip right there. So I always like making sure that we have the parking area specifically marked, especially when like Josh and I are sharing beta, because it's happened to me a couple times where yeah, we'll meet at that one at the top of the pass, and then I park here and he parks over here, and we're just waiting for each other, out of cell service, being like, where is he? What's going on? So I always like marking my parking areas, and then I'm actually going to start building this folder. So this is the way that I like to organize all the data we're going to build in onX, and I'll be sharing this folder at the end of the class too, to show you how easy it is. But we're going to add to the folder. I actually created one in advance of this class, but we're going to call it the Silverton one. And that's going to be the first thing we're going to add into this folder and save it. So now we've established like where we're going to park. Awesome. Cool. So the next thing is just like getting a better idea of like where we want to go. So to get over to, our goal is to get over here to Cemetery. So we're going to follow kind of a shared skin track right here up McMillan. And again, if you click like any of these, you can start getting some information. You could even see on this map, like just at a glance, like you can see that little dot kind of following, like, okay, it's 0.7 miles to this junction right here where we're going to do this. But I'm actually going to break out the route builder too in a second. But this gives you a lot of information just right off the get-go, in terms of like an approach trail. But then we're going to deviate from that and build our own custom route with this. So Josh, the first thing I'm looking at in this is, and from experiences, we're here, we get out the parking lot, and you're kind of already immediately presented with this kind of big blob right here. I'll turn on our slope angle layer just to show the steepness of this. But it's interesting, just avalanche terrain right out of the parking lot in this instance, and just kind of like keeping an eye on this. So Josh, you said there have been burials underneath this cliff band before, right?
Yeah, kind of over, pretty much where your yellow marker is. Correct.
Yeah.
And a wise, I'm going to make fun of him, a wise old man. I don't know if he's tuned in tonight or not. once told me that the less time you're in avalanche terrain is the less time you're in avalanche terrain. So we may be willing to ski down something that there's no way we're going to feel comfortable skinning up just because that extended exposure time. So on the way up, I tend to be pretty darn conservative. If there's any sort of danger at all, I might bump my skin track a little more to the west or right as you're skinning in on the skin track.
Yeah.
So the
And
skin tracks that we have drawn in here, they're just rough. You gotta still be willing to turn your eyes on, turn your brain on when you go out there. And don't get blue dot syndrome where you're just following the dot on the map on the way up.
yeah, that's really good advice, and one that I swear by too is like this app is just a tool and you need to kind of use, your real world skills. But this is actually like the first. I'll turn on our eights layer and just show you what this looks like with the eights layer turned on. Because a lot of times too, like if you're in here, like this road is flat. You're in the bottom of a valley and you're like, I am not ascending or descending anything that has a steep slope angle, therefore I'm safe. And one of the things our eights layer can do is just like highlight areas that you might miss. So there's our disclaimer. Awesome. I'll turn off the slope angle so it's less rainbow. But you can see like green is simple terrain, blue is challenging, which is the level 2, and then this black is challenging. So you can see that what this eights layer is doing right now is accounting for this avalanche runout path that extends into this flat area. So this is why I love the eights layer. It's just like if you're planning your route and you're looking at slope angle, you're like, okay, we're not in that steep part, therefore we're fine. Like this, I always like playing the routes and then turning this layer on and just like making sure I didn't miss anything in terms of like exposure using this layer. So that's our first example of like what eights can show you, just in even very, very basic terrain right outside of the car. And then, yeah, like while I'm building my routes, I like to drop like waypoints of like places it's like, hey, look up, right? So do you have anything to add on that, Josh?
No, I love adding waypoints in there at critical spots, either transitions like, hey, once we drop this ridge, we're kind of committed to the backside, or hey, this is our first decision point if we want route A or route B. So I'll drop a few of those in there too.
Sweet. Awesome. So I'll just continue just like scouting the route. So we're going to continue over this way. Sorry, it's a little zoomed in. Let me zoom out a little bit. So again, our goal is to get over here and over this thing into cemetery. And like another use of like the eights layer too is just showing some of the terrain that we're going through in terms of the classification. So pretty low angle. If we flip over back to low angle, pretty low angle terrain. You can see that it's very densely wooded. And it minimizes our exposure going up this way versus like, let's say just skinning directly up the cemetery. So we're going to continue along this road over here and then follow the tracks up through here. And then I also want to just point out again, just another steep section that we could see in onX Backcountry with the slope angle turned on and just like have a decision point there as well. So like if you look at our track, it kind of goes up a pretty steep portion. In fact, it might actually be more representative to go through here. But like just using this,
it's a
yeah,
smidge off there but yes, that's
yeah. Another perfect example of how you shouldn't just follow the blue dot on your phone on these tracks. So, so yeah, we have two ways we can ascend here is just like, do we want to go through this chute? And if we turn on our eights layer again, that can paint a different picture. So we'd be crossing through kind of a terrain trap and some more complex terrain, or we could opt to continue to follow the road over here and go around the bend instead. So Josh, you have any beta to add there?
Yeah, totally. Or I mean, no, I don't. That nailed it.
Cool. Sweet. So once you ascend to the top of this ridge, this is when you start getting those awesome views of the San Juans. And you're kind of still following this existing road. I wouldn't go up here either. But like sticking away from this, like this rollover right here is steep. And if you're sticking really close to that run out, you have the potential to get carried. So plenty of room over here to give it a little wide berth. And then, once you get to the ridge line, you can start making a decision. Like this is when we first get our eyes on cemetery, which is this descent right here. So you can make the decision right here, like, how does this ridge look? When Josh and I were out on it last year, it was a little windswept and rocky on the summit. So we actually opted to kind of cut this corner and start our drop here. But if it looks great, like this is a really good place to just kind of go up to the top and ride some great, fairly low angle turns down the face of this. Got anything to add about upper, Josh?
Yeah, can you go back over to that other decision point underneath
Yeah,
some of
this one right here.
it's like right around the corner to the yeah, a little back,
Okay,
so we can see the corner in that ridge line.
cool. This is good.
Yeah, there you go. So
Okay.
same old man, same wise man once told me, don't leave good snow to find good snow. So right above that yellow X, once you get up on that bench, if your objective for the day with your buddies is, hey, let's like shred boot top powder and get a bunch of laps in, and there's good snow right there, I might pull the plug on the cemetery, regardless of conditions, just because I don't need to leave good snow to find good snow. And you can see in the satellite imagery layer that there's a bunch of good shots in the trees over there. And if your goal, yeah, totally, a bunch of good shots in the trees right there, and a bunch of fun low angle above the trees right there. So don't leave good snow to find good snow. That's my first decision point. If you do decide to go around the corner to the upper terrain Matt was talking about, that's another great decision point. Don't leave good snow to find good snow. And the less time you're in avalanche terrain is the less time you're in avalanche terrain. So right by that green dot in the middle there, there's a bunch of like 20-degree slopes right there from the tippy top all the way down to the trees on the cemetery side. Yep, that whole right above the green dot there. And again, if your goal is to just ride POW, no one ever complains about skiing a 1,200-foot boot top POW run because it was only 27 degrees, right? And you can see the slope angle shading there. There's one kind of roll right in the middle there below that road cut. But other than that, it's relatively benign terrain. You
Yeah, and
do
I can turn on this eights layer as well just to see what that looks like in here. So you can see like a lot of this green simple terrain, but then also you see where that roller is we talked about, and even like the top here, there's some more challenging terrain just as the things get a little steeper and a little more connected. So
yeah, so the green being simple terrain or terrain where you can relatively easily mitigate the avalanche risk. So you can ski a bunch of low angle terrain up there. You do have to have a decision point at the green. Once you drop below that road cut, that line going across the middle of the screen there, you are now committed to either going back up and out or down the cemetery. So you just have to make sure you're talking with your crew. Hey, if we drop below here and we're kind of zonked from a big day, our only option is up and out or down the cemetery. So that's another good decision point.
awesome. So let's say we had some great turns up here, and now we're looking at the cemetery and we want to go for the cemetery. So what things, like especially as this road cut, like this is another good point to probably check in with your crew and assess what you've experienced and what you're doing, right?
To give reference from the top of that peak above the cursor to about tree line, depending where you're calling tree line there, is about 1,300 feet. And then from the trees to the road is about 1,300 feet. If you go from the tippy top all the way to the road, it's about 2,500 feet.
And actually I can build this with our line tool that I just turned on. So it tells your distance yards. You hit save, it'll give you the elevation profile. Yeah, so like that looks pretty spot on. It's pretty close.
Give or take, depending on what you're calling, the trees before the cemetery.
Yeah, exactly. I'll delete that one. So cool. Let's say we're gonna go for the cemetery. Like what advice do you have to like ride the cemetery appropriately without putting yourself in a terrain trap or a gully? Whoa, that might ruin the vibe.
So the cemetery, the trickiest spot is definitely the entrance into it, which is just Skinner's left or Skier's right of where the line is at the top there. So Matt, can you go back to the face of the cemetery right quick?
Yeah, I think this is it, right?
Yeah, there
Do I
you
have a
go.
delay?
Keep that up.
Must have a
So
delay. Sorry,
yeah, no,
hopefully
it's all
it's
good.
not.
It's just Skier's right of the down track. And that's the
Yeah.
steepest spot. It's the most exposed, you can see with purple or black, in terms of both angle and ATES. And it's the most into a terrain trap. So a small slide in there would be consequential into that terrain trap, with other slide paths hitting from the other sides of the gully. Once you're on it, though, you can see that that angle really lowers up, or lessens up, and you have sparse trees, with the good skiing tending to be on the skier's right, outside of that black, kind of right along the edge of the gully right there. Yep, it's just got a little more north to it, and it's going to ski a lot better. Can you do either slope aspect or the topo on there,
Yeah,
Matt?
I'll do slope aspect here.
And
Is
then
there a delay?
turn off the angle. That's fine.
Do you want topo on?
Either way, just so
Okay,
we can see that there's a hint more north on that skier's right side.
there you go. I'll use this one. Yeah, so this
Uh,
is the blue shading here.
yeah, so
Oh
you
yeah,
can see with the topo, just like right along that right ridge line, skier's right is going to be your best snow. In terms of exposure, so we have 3 different dials when we're traveling in the backcountry. We have likelihood, we have consequence, and we have exposure. And maybe it takes you 10 seconds to run across I-70. So the exposure is very low, but the likelihood of getting hit is very high and the consequence is very high. So I'm not willing to turn up 2 of those dials. So in terms of the cemetery, there are folks, and that's fine, that decide to skin up from the bottom. So in moderate danger, natural is unlikely, humans possible. Their exposure to hike up those 1,200 feet is probably going to be somewhere between 45 minutes and an hour and 15 of exposure. Where on the way down, your exposure skiing might be only 5 minutes. And additionally, when you're skiing, not that you're going to bank on being able to ski out of a slide, you're just a little bit more maneuverable. When you're going uphill in skin mode, you're just kind of a sitting duck. You can't move at all. So I might be willing to ski that along that skier's right side this week. I might not be willing to skin up it this week because the exposure on the way down is very quick. Say maybe moderate likelihood, but low consequence, or however you want to do it. I'm willing to turn up one of the dials. I'm not willing to turn up 2. Does that kind of make sense?
that makes sense. Yeah, and one thing too, like I just realized there's probably a little bit of delay, so I'm going to make sure hopefully that I go a little slow here with the screen recording. But I forgot we hadn't turned on slope aspect yet. But yeah, so if we're looking at these different colors and you're like, what does this mean? The key for the slope aspect is actually down here on our compass. So you can see it's turned into a rainbow, and that shows you like the dark purple is like north facing, and then the reds are west facing, and so on and so forth. So like that's how you can use this layer to determine, like based especially on like the avalanche report and like getting notified in that of like what aspects are problematic. That's how this slope aspect layer can come in handy.
Hey, just super quick. So Seth in the audience commented on the name of the cemetery. So the majority of the names in the book or the guidebook or the app are just CDOT named slide paths. We weren't inventing the names. And cemetery is just the name of the CDOT named slide path that is one of the many ones on red. So we just use that. But you're right, it's not the best name for a ski line. The one next to it is called the graveyard for reference.
Cool. Well, I think we figured out cemetery. The next thing I want to do is just do a quick example of using the route builder to like have this to calculate our distances, and just to have like a plan in our pocket. So we're going back to the top of the pass over here. Here's where our parking is. And then up in this right corner, this is the route builder. So we click on this and we're going to call this cemetery. And then you can change your colors. You can change your style, your weight, etc. I like having a solid line and keeping it this blue color, or the onX Backcountry blue. And then there's also 2 buttons here that I think are really useful. There's snap to and point draw. So if you're doing like a hiking trail, like snap to is really useful because it can snap along it and like follow a hiking trail. Most of these backcountry runs are more freeform and don't follow existing roads or things. So I always like using this point draw. I find it's a lot more effective for backcountry planning. And then what I'm going to do is just click here at our parking lot and then just start following along the route. and just putting that line together. So that way, if we're like looking at our phone for reference, we don't need to like figure out exactly like where we're going. And this will give us a better picture since we're stringing together like an approach, a descent, a varied option. And then you can see as I'm clicking through here, like you're getting your elevation profile, you're getting your distance and your elevation as you go. So if you're like very sensitive to like, hey, I only want to go 4 miles or whatever, you can start like building a route based on that spec. So we're going to continue on this. We're going to go over here, keep it a little more general through here. We're going to punch up through this gut. We're going to go through here. And then, yeah, I'm going to get kind of broad as we get to the top. We're going to come down cemetery. And yeah, I find the more you click, the better you get. It's just like kind of clicking along these points. And then, awesome. So that's cemetery. So now we have a better idea of like where our route goes, what the distance is, what the elevation gain is, how often we're going to have to go uphill, and then what our elevation loss is. So calling this cemetery, and I'm going to add this to the folder that we've established for Silverton.
So wait, if we do the cemetery, that route, we go up 1,500 and down 2,400.
Yeah.
So free 900 feet. That's pretty rad.
Yeah, there's an article, I think it was an outside, or it was like a social media post that says, are you an uphill or a downhill athlete? Personally, I like the downhill more than the uphill. Josh, what camp do you find yourself in?
I only go down so I can go up. Or no, wait, the other way around. Other way around.
Exactly. So that's another beauty of this San Juan experience is, having the ability to have a car up here and then gaining some elevation and then descending more than you're up. But
Will you
that adds
pause right there for a minute, Matt?
Yeah.
So 2 things. So one, Matt in the audience said long hike back to your car. So it's not uncommon to either have a shuttle parked if you have several people, or it's a very hitch friendly path. So it's very, yeah, Robert nailed it. Either hitchable or shuttle. And then the other thing that I like to do, so Matt is drawing these all on the computer, but he'll open it up on the phone. So then this route will show on your onX on your phone. And
Yeah,
then,
I'll do that at the end. I'll show
yeah,
actually
but
how that all
wait,
works.
leave it right there. Then what I do is I'll screenshot the open onX on my phone and I make it my lock screen. So
That's
then when
great
I
too.
need like live mapping, I can open the app and like see where I'm at and see the elevation, all the distance. But if all I need is a quick glance at the entrance to the cemetery or whatever the run is, you can leave your gloves on and just tap it because the picture on your lock screen is your map that you drew in.
Yeah, I love that tip. Like that's one of the best ones I think I've heard in a while that I don't do. So adding that to my playbook. Cool. So we have one awesome descent planned. So we also had our objective list to go and ride Chattanooga. So let's quickly get into that since we're already going here. So Chattanooga, what do you like about it? What do you want to do with it?
So
Give us
same
the
deal.
intro.
I like tours that have one, a lot of options, and two that are tours. The Deer Creek one is super fun to go up and down and up and down, but I like the kind of parking here, going up here, skiing down here, like linkable tours. So we get down to the base of the cemetery and we're like, wow, that was great. Maybe we park the shuttle at the beginning. We stop for a water refill or to change layers. It's a little later in the day. And then we're going to head up the Sam skin track, that zigzaggy track in the middle there. One of the cool things about Red Mountain Pass is when you're on one side, you have a really good view of the other. So my entire way down the cemetery, especially from the top and higher up, I'm looking over at the terrain that we might go ski next. Maybe I take some photos of it. I'm trying to see if there's any natural avalanches, any skier triggered avalanches, and you have a really good perspective because once we're in those trees, it's kind of a pain to see what's going on. So we
Yeah.
got to the bottom. We feel good. We've done our option A so far. We skied the cemetery, which was a great ski, especially on that right side. The snowboarder and Matt cut over my tracks, but that's okay. And we're like, hey, we want to do a little bit more. So now we can go up Sam's, up that green, and then we have options from there, either coming down the east facing side or coming down the north facing side. So the whole tour, we continue to have options at every leg of the way.
Yeah, and I like this tour a lot too because these lines are pretty heavy, right? Like if we turn on our 8s layer, this is when we're starting to look at terrain that is, we have challenging terrain this direction. We have challenging terrain here. And then we have your complex and even some extreme terrain up here. So like all of these, this area kind of has it all. And from when you're standing on this ridge too, you'll have a better vantage point. I think personally, like looking at this avalanche report, it's going to be a kind of a real decision will be made here, whether or not we're going down and I think riding the more conservative part of this Chattanooga versus going for a coin slot and the steep exposed terrain, or possibly even coming down through Sam's and riding through Sam's Glades. So
I would totally concur with that. And again, not to beat it in, but don't leave good snow to find good snow. If we get to the top of the decision point, that red dot at the top of the green, and there's been a lot of human triggered, we just don't feel good about the steepness and the pitch and the commitment of that north face, and the east facing Sam's is skiing good, we can ski a great line down there. It is still avalanche terrain. If you look at like a 1964 USGS topo map, way before onX, they do not have this terrain treed. They think it is so sparsely treed that there's no trees on the map. There was an avalanche fatality in this terrain just a few years ago. So it's definitely still avalanche terrain, but it is not as committing, and it is much more simple than complicated terrain versus the north side of Chattanooga.
And I'm surprised I don't see it. Yeah, I was going to point out, I don't know, I don't see it right now, but there was onX Backcountry. We have historic avalanche fatalities. Oh, there it was. Historic avalanche fatalities can appear on our maps. It's what these logos are. I don't know why he's being shy today, but it's another good indicator of like, you can click on this and get more information on like what happened. So there was an avalanche up here on, I think it was 2016, right? Where 2 skiers were caught and carried, and I think 1 had perished. And it's just another helpful reminder that like, even though you see this tree terrain and you say, okay, this is our safe option, doesn't really mean that you're in the clear with this terrain. So just a solemn reminder. Cool. So
can we touch on that for a minute? So I think those are important. If you're a mountain biker and you go out mountain biking and the trail's really gnarly, you get instant feedback. It's like, right? You get the instant feedback and you learn to become better. If you want to become a better sport climber, you go to the gym and get super strong. We don't often have feedback in avalanche terrain because hopefully we're doing stuff right. So it's really hard to get that kinetic feedback or kinesthetic learning that you would have in biking or climbing or golf or swimming. So being able to look on the map and be like, oh, there's a history of issues at this one spot is a great feature for sure. Not in a judgment way, but in like, there's other stuff that's been going on here. What can I see happened? Oh, the conditions are similar to when that went down. And it's good kinesthetic or visual learning.
Yeah, those icons I think are really game changing for us. Like in Utah and a handful of other places, we have worked with the avalanche centers to include like incidents and observations as markers as well that look kind of similar to that one. So kind of like showing the importance of like the avalanche explorer thing that we went through earlier. Cool. Well, before we kind of start building our track, is there anything else you want to discuss with this line?
No, just again, continuing to have options. And when I put together a tour, I try to use the verbiage like, hey, what if we ski up the east side of Red Mountain Pass? Maybe we'll ski the cemetery down to the bottom, and then we're going to explore Sam's and Chattanooga. And I try to be vague. That way, if Matt and I get out there and we decide to pull the plug on Chattanooga, but we ski Sam's, we're still successful in terms of the verbiage of our tour. If I'm really specific, like, hey, we're going to go ski the Narnar chute today, and we ski anything else, in my mind, it feels more like a failure. So I try to be vague in terms of the verbiage and use things like general tour as opposed to this specific line.
Yeah, I hope that comes through in this webinar too, with just like being objective focused and like just saying like looking at this line right here and saying like, oh, this is the craziest, this coin slot is the craziest, steepest thing, I'm gonna do it. Like that's why we spent so much time at the beginning of this, like talking about the avalanche conditions. Just because I think it's really essential for just to not have blinders on, always have a plan B. So cool. Well, I think it's time we can start doing the routing here. I'm going to turn on our slope angle layer just to show pockets of micro terrain that we should look out for. We're going up here, but like I like doing it this way too. So back in the route builder, back to point draw, and we're going to say the approach. Chatty approach. Make this one green. So we're going to start going up here. We're going to follow this skin track up. And Josh, I remember when you and I did this last year, it was a pretty heinous skin track that day.
Yeah, so it tends to be very east facing no matter where you are. So they're often, even if there is 6 or 8 or 10 inches of fresh, there's a crust underneath it. So it can be a very side slippery skin track. There are options on that north side, right at the Chattanooga curve. But as you can see from the shading, it's way steeper. So you just got to pick your poison. But yeah, it's kind of a steep skin track for sure. Very side hilly.
Yeah. And I'm going to put another one of these. Oh, we'll put a waypoint on the top of this, just denoting that this is our decision point. All right, decision point. We'll add this to our folder as well. And then we're going to mark up. Oh, here we go. So this would be like what I'd consider our plan A, right? Like, I think sticking, or I'll turn off the slope angle. Like all this terrain over here is really steep. So like it's all consequential, but there's a little more tree coverage on this one. And if we turn on our ATES rating too, you can see that it goes through a little bit more challenging terrain versus like the complex or even extreme terrain that you see in some of these other ones. So like, Josh, this is actually what you and I rode last time we were out. It was awesome. I feel like I wouldn't even gotten anything else if I had gone a little bit further over in the middle. Like this was just beautiful and the trees held snow really well.
Yeah, so I love that the trees hold snow really good there. It's pretty rare that you get to the top of whatever Telluride or the top of you pick the line or the run or the resort and it's like blower snow up at the summit outside of the trees. So sticking to the little more treed terrain, which is also a little more protected from say the avalanche problem and gives you a little more spots to hide, was going to hold better snow a lot of the time.
I wanted to use this as an example too to show just another thing the ATES layer can do for you. So you can see like we have this ATES layer turned on. We're at the bottom of this valley, but like look at these runout paths that this is documenting, right? Like these areas, even if you're standing at the bottom of this road, waiting for a car to pick you up, you could be in avalanche terrain through these. So like this is another thing of like, why is the ATES layer awesome? This is it. Because the avalanche path actually crosses the road not once, but twice through this corkscrew here. So just be careful. Like, if you're waiting here for your buddy to pick you up, like, maybe stick to the side that has a little more trees versus this big open avalanche chute, to wait for your friend, right? So that's our plan A. And then we'll do a quick plan B. Cool. Plan B. Point draw. Cool. And we'll just follow Sam's glade. Sweet. So I think we have a pretty solid plan for today. Hopefully my lag isn't very bad. All right, so we'll make that one the green. Sure. And I'm gonna add to my folder. Sweet. So this is my folder now, right? It's got all of the different things we've been working on, all the different lines. And in fact, I'm gonna share it with you all right now. So in the chat, I'm dropping this in here. Chat to everyone. Bam. So when you click this link, you all will have access to this tour. And then what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to show you how to just make sure your phone's ready. So I'm going to switch to my phone. Cool. And then I'm going to share my screen. This one.
And did that make sense about the screenshot for your phone, Matt?
Yeah, it did. Actually, I'll show that.
Matt.
So like, oh, I actually have another layer turned on, which I'll go over in a little bit. But like, this is all of the information that we've made. So I didn't need to move GPX files or anything. It's synced with my onX account. So if you're on a tablet, if you're on a desktop computer, if you're whatever, it's ready to go. So you just want to make sure that before you actually go on your tour that you're opening the app and making sure that all the data has come in. You can view that information right here in the My Content section. You see this is our Silverton folder right here. And then you can open it all up. And then, yeah, one of the things I like doing too is that there are these 2 buttons up here. hide folder on map or show only this folder on the map. So like the maps get really cluttered as you keep building them. So like if you're just like, I don't want any distraction, I just want to see what's on my map. That's why I like using this. That's why I'm obsessed with folder building, because you can turn everything else off and just use it. So quickly to go over like how to use it on the phone. This is your layers. This is how you go into 3D. You click that and you get a pretty similar experience to what you'd experience on desktop. You can navigate around. Just note 3D only works online right now, not offline. And then I'll show you quickly how to create an offline map. So at the bottom, there's discover offline maps, my content, tools, etc. So you click offline maps, hit new map. And then you're just going to want to make sure the area that you're hanging out in is encompassed within this map. So, and I like using the high resolution. You can actually choose which resolution you want. That affects your download size. But I like having the crispest satellite imagery I can when I'm backcountry skiing, so you can see like individual trees and stuff. So you can zoom out and make this bigger. You can make it more tight. You can create a network of just like a couple different zones if you want to just capture a couple areas, but just make sure all the areas that you are in or might be in are covered. Download your map. Make sure it downloads. My internet's really slow today, apparently. So here it goes.
I would do like Matt is saying 2 or 3 or maybe 4 maps for red. You're never going to be on the north side of red in Commodore Basin, then tour all the way over to Deer Creek, 20 miles south over 3 passes and through town in the same day. So there's no reason that I need to have one map for the whole zone. I can just have different maps for those specific spots.
Yeah, and that's like a good tip too, is just to save storage space on your phone, because these maps can get pretty big. So before I go into the backcountry, I use this go offline button. And what this does is it tells the app like, hey, don't use any service right now. And I use this to test, right? Like I'll zoom in, I'll say my topo lines look good. I'll go to my satellite imagery and say, all right, I can see everything. This is great. And just double check that you have it. And then, the app will work if you're in airplane mode, which I like to be in. I think everyone really should be in if they're in the backcountry, just to minimize like interference with your beacon. And yeah, I think that's all I had to go over for the tour plan. Did we stick the landing?
Yeah, that was great. And then I just screenshot that and make it my lock screen.
Yeah.
This should all be done before you're up at the top of the pass. If I meet Matt at the top of the pass and I try to pump through this in 10 minutes with bad cell and like my wet fingers and my cold hands or whatever, do it ahead of time. Go to the Coffee Bear in the morning. They open early. They have a heated toilet seat, which is super rad.
Ooh.
I know. And spend some time there with your buddies and get a coffee and a burrito and put this together before you head out. If you're doing it last minute in the field, there's no way you're going to be making objective decisions. We all get mad pow disease, and that's what you're going to end up getting. If you're sitting at the Coffee Bear, looking at the map and the forecast, it's way easier to go, hey, I don't think we should ski that today. Like that is just too aggressive. Let's pull it off the chart before we ever even get out there. So do it ahead of time.
Sweet. Awesome. Well, that kind of concludes our demo. Like Josh and I, as you could tell, could probably talk for another 5 hours about different lines we want to ski in Silverton. So hopefully you guys found that useful and learned a couple things. The next thing I want to dive into is it ties into our giveaway partner, Rocky Talkie. They're really spearheading this initiative to centralize the information for what they call community channels. So what a community channel is a designated radio channel for a specific backcountry zone, meant for vital group communication, such as relaying critical safety information like an accident, avalanche, or other hazard. Lance, if you could drop those links into the chat right now, that'd be awesome. Rocky Talkie's been creating this community channels page. It's a great resource. If you don't see your local zone on there, let them know what the channels are. And if there are not channels in your established area, go establish them. Work with people in the community and try to get your community to have these different areas. So I will show you, and actually in that doc, in one of the links that Lance is putting in there, will be a share folder to the area that we were just exploring on our map in the San Juan. So it all comes packaged as a shared folder, and I'm actually going to show you right now like how to turn that on. So we talked again about like the data storage. I had this folder hidden during our presentation, but I'm going to unhide it. And then here is all the community different channels. So like we're actually going to be traversing through a handful of these different channels on the tour we had looked at. But like if we did want to hop on the radios, if you just click on these, I actually set this up this way. It'll tell you the name of the zone and then the radio channel. So channel 7 and then 2 will be the privacy channel. So making sure both of those are set. That's Macmillan's. We'd cross over here into Chatty East at 6.2. And then Chatty West at 6.1. So it could be super valuable if we see another party that's in this valley or has descended below us, being able to communicate with them could be really valuable on our tour.
And those are pretty accurate. I was out guiding on Monday, ran into another random group in the McMillan zone. They had some radios. We had some radios. They were like, sweet, you were here first. We'll let you drop. We're on channel 7.2. That was the zone we were in. And it worked great to communicate with this other group. Everyone played friendly, and it was super neat to have other folks out there be able to communicate with.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be a really game changer in different areas. I mean, communicating with not only your crew with your radios, but other people is going to be really groundbreaking for us all recreating in these spaces together. So, and again, like if this gets overwhelming, right? Like it's kind of like coloring my map and shading everything. You go back in here and you go into the folder and you select hide folder on map and bye-bye, goes away. So that's why I'm obsessed with content management in onX Backcountry. If you saw my personal account, you might be very concerned for me because there's just like tens of thousands of waypoints and campsites and mountain bike rides and everything. So I've gotten really obsessive with folder stuff. So I encourage you to as well. Cool. So we're at the end of our class. So this is a last chance. Like if you don't have onX Backcountry, here's a great place to start. 30% off, or start your 14-day free onX Backcountry Elite trial. And then on that same landing page that I just showed that Lance will pop in the chat one more time is our giveaway. So we're going to draw the winners here very shortly. If you haven't entered, do so now. And then we're also, while we're waiting for people to jump into this, go into one more initiative. Do you want to go ski in Antarctica with Josh?
So I got to do a quick plug. A buddy in the audience, Rob, took this photo of me skiing last October when we were in Antarctica. The ship we were living on is the black dot way out there in the middle above the N. And then that's me opening a new zone. I think Rob skied second down on the Antarctic Peninsula. I do have a couple spots available in an October trip that I'm doing with Ice Axe Expeditions. My rope team. So if you're interested, reach out.
Yeah, Lance will put some of those links in the chat. You also have the Wilderness First Responder classes coming up. And we'll also include this contact information for Josh in the webinar post email. So yeah. Cool. All right. We're going to open up for a couple questions. Thank you all for sticking. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, there's been a bunch of questions. No. There's been some questions in the chat that weren't the questions that I was trying to follow along with.
Okay.
That maybe you could hit on or I could hit on. One was on lat long, and I think you showed that initially, and then someone put using UTMs possibly for more accuracy. And then there were some questions down lower from like Pete and Nathan about radio channels. Like, is there an emergency channel? Are these like regulated channels? Do you just switch to them? So maybe you could hit on that a little bit.
Yeah. I'll start with the radio channel one. That's the thing I think that Rocky Talkie, I'm excited they're spearheading this, is it's a lot of like, the information scattered in a lot of different places. So like they're trying to centralize the database. Like usually it's like a crew or a Facebook group saying like, hey, we want to establish a community channel. And just having the word spread through like more tight knit groups versus like having resources like, I'm going to the San Juans. Like, how do I do this? So I think isn't there a new emergency channel for Colorado? Isn't it 3? I think they're working on establishing that.
Yes.
I thought I heard. Okay, cool. So yeah, 3. Thanks, Matt. So yeah, all that stuff like is super critical. And let's see, like the best way for lat long. Are you talking about like for a user?
I just saw someone put like, how do you find lat long? I think they meant like when I'm on my map screen, can I see my coordinates is what I'm thinking.
Yeah. So I'll show this. This is kind of like small, but down in this corner is the lat long of where your cursor is. And I like using this when I'm on my desktop. So like you can see, like even when you're just scrolling around, I don't know if you can actually see it, but down in this bottom right corner is your lat long of like where your cursor actually currently is. And then another good way, if you want to see the lat long of any object, waypoints are a really great place to put it if you're trying to mark like a specific location. And then you can even copy those coordinates just by hitting that button. So I always use the waypoints when I'm referencing them. So yeah, I hope, like, I want a little bit easier way to just reference, like if you're in the field, like in our app, it's a little bit harder to just see like this is my current location. So we will work on that.
Then there
Cool.
was another question from Seth, lives in Summit County, but from northern New Mexico. Tell me if I'm off point here, Seth. And New Mexico just got a beacon guidebook, which was written by Mark Beverly, who's a longtime IFMGA guide, and he's a buddy of mine, with a bunch of stuff around the Taos and Santa Fe areas. In terms of how do we decide what lines go in here? So the backstory that I was like, oh, I forgot to say it on my notes. So thanks for reminding me, Seth. The whole Silverton zone. So I owned and operated a ski and mountain guide service for 10 years. And the publisher of Beacon Guidebooks, Andy Sovic, reached out. We went to college together at Fort Lewis, and he said, hey, I know you're running a ski guide service. I know you have everything mapped and you have photos. Any interest in a guidebook? And I was like, oh, we already have it all mapped. We use it on courses. We use it on guiding. Sure, like let's toss together a guidebook. So I didn't come at it from the perspective of trying to write a new guidebook. I had a bunch of this already put together that my buddy from college who had published one for Crested Butte reached out and was like, would you have any interest in making it the second book? So we're on the third edition of the Silverton book right now. The fourth edition we're going to be working on this summer and hopefully coming out with next year because the third edition's almost out of print. But that's the background of it in terms of like choosing lines. In terms of the specific lines in the Red Mountain Pass Zone, if you go through onX and you look at everything on there, I would say 90% of them are roadside attractions. So we weren't giving away any secrets. Most of them, like Battleship or Chattanooga or Cemetery, they're just CDOT named slide paths. We just put a little more context to them. So we felt like we weren't giving away any secrets. And then it was all terrain that I was utilizing on courses and that I was skiing. I wasn't writing a guidebook about, say, Jackson Hole per se, where I've never skied, and selling their secrets. It was all stuff from right around here that I was utilizing in programs. So hopefully that answers your question, Matt. Or sorry, Seth.
Sweet. All right. Cool. Oh, I had a really good question here that I feel like goes unseen. So I'll go into this. So we have a question on how did you get the snow coverage to show on satellite? This is my favorite feature that's like slightly buried. So I'll show two instances of it. So when you go, this is the similar experience on your phone, but like there's this map layer right here. You go into here, and that's where you can select between your topo, your hybrid, and your satellite. And then this section that's a little bit smaller lets you change your preferred base map imagery when you're in the satellite view. This will toggle on. So like you actually don't see it here when you're in topo, but when you go into satellite, you can see it. And then when you click on this, this is your summer imagery, the high quality imagery, which is a little bit more resolute. Like winter's really hard to get. So like sometimes you might get a blurry or a cloud in the way in the winter. This is the snow imagery. And then if you're an onX Backcountry Elite member, this is, I think, one of the mind-blowing things we have in the app is this recent imagery layer. So this is available to onX Backcountry Elite subscribers. And what this does is every 2 weeks, we're taking a picture of these different zones and, giving you a real feel of like what the snow conditions are like. So it is proving to be most useful when you're looking at, like, let's look at October. Let me take a second for it to populate. So, you can see in October and November, you can actually watch the snow fill in these lines, right? So this has been really useful for me, early season scouting, late season scouting. We've had this for almost a year. So like, you can actually go back to the spring and see like when these lines melted out. And this is super useful for me for not only backcountry skiing, and I did that turns all year thing for a couple of years and have since retired from it, but also when you start looking at like, I want to go on a backpacking trip, I want to go on a 14er hike, and you start looking at the mountains, you're like, oh, there's still a lot of snow up there. So this is one of my favorite features. onX Backcountry Elite, I think it's worth it. So cool. Well, I think we're really bumping up on time. You got something, Josh?
Well, another question. So,
Okay.
Alexander asked, isn't taking an area important for a tour too? So having an avalanche education, I think is what Alex is saying. Tell me if I'm wrong, Alex. Yeah, absolutely. You should have some sort of formal avalanche training. Matt said at the beginning, this is not an avalanche course. This is just one more tool. That being said, I think onX and what Matt and I presented along with an avalanche course is a really lethal, or not, bad term. Sorry, scratch that. Not lethal, a really great tool in your toolbox. So when I teach an avalanche course, I like to say, hey, after a rec level 1 avalanche course, a student should be able to, and then you fill in the blank. I think after a rec level 1 avalanche course, a student should be able to book a hut somewhere in Colorado and put together some basic tours and figure out some basic risk management. That's not too much to ask for someone taking an avalanche course. And hopefully your course goes over some mapping. If not, reach out. But between your course and the tools in here, really set up a Rec 1 or Rec 2 student for a successful winter. Hopefully that answers your question, Alex. But definitely agree, should have an avalanche course.
Yeah, I agree too. Like the things we're talking about now are very different from the companion rescue aspects, as well as like the in-field observations. So what we're doing is kind of like trying to mimic what they do with the mapping portion of their classes, but doesn't even touch it. And that's why I tap in pros like Josh to help me talk through it, because I'm just a recreationalist at the end of the day. So like it's good to have a pro on the call with me to help run these. So cool. Well, let's do this giveaway. The moment we've all been waiting for. We have over 150 entries in here. So cool. Everybody's here, and we'll be reaching out via email, but let's spin that wheel. It's my favorite part of the webinar. Josh Carey, give us a woo woo if you're in the chat. If you're not in the chat, we'll still email you and send you what you need to do, because I know we're running late here. So cool. Awesome. Well, on that note, thank you everybody for attending. Thank you, Josh, for talking about maps for me for an hour and 40 minutes tonight. Thank you for all for being here and staying around till the end. Tune into the next one. We are going to talk a little bit more about snow, but we're also going to start talking about rock climbing and how to use the onX Backcountry app and the mountain project information that was recently integrated in there, as well as mountain bike project content, how to plan a backpacking trip. I can't wait to see what else we talk about. So yeah, thank you guys so much. Thanks everyone for tuning in. Tell your friends, and all of our recordings are up on YouTube after this as well. So if you found value in this, you want to share it, it'll be up on onX Backcountry's YouTube. And with that, thank you all. Thank you, Josh. Thanks, Lance, for manning the chat, and we'll catch you next time. See y'all.
Later, crew.